Hi, thanks for joining us for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. I'm Chris Cooper. Plants are great when they bloom, but what about plants that do something great every season of the year? Also, we're going to talk about pond maintenance. That's just ahead on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is Dr. Kelly. Dr. Kelly is a retired professor of horticulture, and Mr. D will be joining me later. Dr. Kelly, good to see you.
Yeah, good to be here, as always.
As always, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
We do a lot of laughing.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And learning all at the same time, right? So let's talk about plants with multi-season interests. So where you want to start with that?
Well, there's so many. I just picked 10 of my favorites.
Right.
And the first one on my list is the rabbit eye blueberry. Right. It grows down here, it's native, and people love them because they have pretty fruit, they have pretty flowers in the spring, they even have a pretty fall color. They have a red, orangey, pretty fall color. And then when they totally defoliate in the winter, they have little exfoliating bark. So you're talking about a plant that's pretty year-round in some aspect or the other, and then you get the bonus of eating the blueberries.
And you can eat them.
Yeah.
Okay, like it.
And then my second plant is the oak leaf hydrangea.
Yeah, like
it's
that one.
another native. And it has those pretty blooms, you know, spherical kind of blooms in the spring or early summer. And then in the fall, it has the pretty red kind of colored foliage. And then in the winter, if you leave those flower stalks there, they're kind of pretty. You know, they just dry right, dry right on the plant, and they're this pretty buff colored. And then the bark is exfoliating as well for the winter interest on the oak leaf hydrangea.
Okay.
And the other one I've got, I just put the genus of maples because there's so many out there that we can pick from. And people don't notice a lot of times in our native woods or even in their garden if they have a maple tree. In the early spring, it's one of the first to bloom. And you miss that a lot. Yeah. You know, you start looking up and you say, what is that little frilly stuff? Well, it's the maple blooms. And then later, you know, in the fall, you have the seed, the samara. But anyway, the winged, you know. And then, of course, we have the beautiful, beautiful fall foliage.
Love it.
You know, it can just be any color imaginable. And some of the maples kind of are, they keep their color, you know, all the way during the summer. I've got a maple that comes out purple, stays purple. Japanese maples are all real interesting too.
Yeah, they are.
You know, they're kind of expensive, but there's a lot of our just bigger trees, big maples that are awfully pretty. The other one's ornamental grasses. People say, well, they look kind of dead in the winter. Well, they are kind of dead, but it's pretty because this is what I like about the ornamental grasses, like the maiden grass, which is miscanthus, muley grass, one of our natives. The switchgrass is a native, but they have a cultivar called Shenandoah Red that's really pretty. And the thing about the grasses in the garden, in the wintertime, of course, they're pretty all summer. You know, they come up with a different colored foliage or variegated foliage, depending on what kind of grass you got. And then in the fall, you know, they can get kind of go through a little bit of fall coloration, especially the Shenandoah Red switchgrass. But then you have the flower plumes that come up, you know, and they're real. You know, people talk about, these garden designers talk about motion in the garden, you know. Well, in the winter, you get the wind, breeze, it makes those little tassels just go back and forth, and, you know, of course, the leaves are all brown and dead, but they're pretty. So that's one of I like the ornamental grasses for that reason. They're pretty year-round. Sourwood is one of our native trees. I really like sourwood.
Do you?
I really do. I hunt them down if I'm out hiking in the woods, you know. They're called lily of the valley tree because in the summer or spring or whenever they have these blooms that'll come out like fingers. And you can smell them. You can walk around and you go, what's that? And you look up, you know, and it'll be sourwood. So the tassels stay on and then they just stay there and dry up. Of course, you get sourwood honey. Man, yeah, the bees love those flowers and you get that really great honey. Then in the fall, it's like one of the first, right along with black gum and sweet gum that color up. They color up, one of the first ones to one of the trees in the woods to color. Really bright, pretty red. You know, so they're multi-seasonal too. You got your flowers, you got the dried flowers, you got the fall color, And then the tree itself is just a pretty tree. It's more of an understory. It doesn't get really big like a big oak or something.
Okay.
So it's more of an understory.
That's good.
And this Henry Lauder's walking stick.
I'm surprised to see that on your list. Okay.
That's a weird one. Yeah. The first time I laid eyes on that thing was at the President's Garden at Mississippi State University.
Okay.
And I saw that thing and I thought, what is wrong with that thing? Because it's contorted. I mean, the name of it is Corylus of Elevenia contorta. Really interesting looking. Looks like a puzzle. And the fall foliage is pretty. It's kind of a purplish red. And the blooms are pretty. It's got a lot of attributes that, of course, in the winter you see this crazy contorted plant. Everybody goes, what is that thing? So anyway, I like that one. Henry Lauder's walking stick, which is a hazelnut. The English call it a filbert, which I think is kind of interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, the other one is a Chinese or lace bark elm. That one's really amazing. It's got some of the most fascinating bark. Just pretty yellowish. I don't know. I don't even know how to explain. It's all mottled, and the older the tree gets, the prettier it looks, and it has pretty fall foliage. And it's just a nice form tree. They use them a lot in the medians at Mississippi State in the fall, like now. Wow. Yeah, they're pretty fall color, pretty bright yellow. Okay, the next one we're going to talk about is the Washington hawthorn. And it is a small, mid-sized tree that's got a nice shape to it. And you see it in Corinth, my hometown, around entrances to factories because it is a small tree. And it's got a nice, shape, rounded shape. And it has pretty white flowers in the spring in umbels. They're just not real showy, but you get the whole tree in flower, it's pretty showy. But the prettiest thing is in the winter, when that thing totally defoliates, and every branch is packed with these really pretty red berries.
I've seen that.
So and the birds like them, but they wait till they're about starved to death so that they won't eat them until the end of the winter. It's really interesting. They eat all this other stuff, and then you go out there and you see all these birds eating up your hawthorn berries. The other one that I like is the Coosa dogwood. Yeah, it's an interesting dogwood. Of course, it's not the native. It's one that was imported, but it's got some really interesting characteristics. Of course, it's got the dogwood bloom, but the petals, well, on these, they're like this shape. They're pointed. Yeah, they're pointed, and they're pretty white, and it blooms really prolifically in the spring. But then in the winter, it has kind of a okay fall color. Nothing to flip over backwards about. But the pretty thing is those fruit.
Yeah.
It has these big strawberry red fruit that stay on the tree, because I don't think anything eats them.
Really?
No, I haven't seen anything eating them. I don't know if squirrels eat them or not, but anyway, it's a real pretty big berry. In our dogwoods, they're really tiny, about like my little fingernail, tiny. But on this Coosa, they're big, like a strawberry. Anyway, interesting. And then, of course, there's all our crab apples.
Yeah. Okay.
Crab apples, they kind of tend to be sometimes disease prone, but gosh, when they flower, wow. When they flower, they just take over the yard. Just a big flush of pretty flowers. I picked this one called Prairie Fire. And I looked at the pictures and I thought, man, that thing's gorgeous. I've got a couple of crab apples in my yard, but not this one. I got another one, but I don't remember the name of it. And then you get the fall color. They have pretty fall color. And then you get the fruit, for the winter. Okay. So to me, those are my picks.
Those are your top 10?
Yeah, top 10, I'd say. And then there's lots of others.
Oh, yeah, there's plenty of others.
There could be, people could, come up with some more, I'm sure.
And all of these are relatively easy to grow, easy to care?
Yep, I have nearly every one of these.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have to come out to your yard to see that.
Oh, I don't have old Henry Lauder, though.
Oh, you don't have the Henry Lauder?
No, I don't have him. Yeah, I need to get that one.
Well, Dr. Kelly, we appreciate that. That's good information.
Sure.
Fun as always. Thank you much. Let's talk a little bit about Virginia creeper. Virginia creeper is a native perennial woody vine. It has 5 leaflets. 5 leaflets, not 3. If it had 3 leaflets, it would be poison ivy. So again, this has 5 leaflets, Virginia creeper. It has beautiful fall foliage, as you can well see. It has little adhesive disc on its tendrils, which allows it to stick to just about any surface. It will develop a fruit, and of course the birds and the wildlife enjoy the fruit. It grows in full sun and full shade. Can be used as a ground cover as well. But if you're having problem with Virginia creeper, here's what you do. Just mow it, pull it, get your weed eater out and just knock it out that way. No need to use any chemicals. So again, Virginia Creeper, 5 leaflets, not 3. All right, Mr. D, let's talk a little bit about pond care, pond maintenance.
You know, the University of Tennessee has a real good publication that if you've got a pond, I encourage you to you can go online and get it like I did and print it off, but it's 50 pages, so you better have plenty of ink and plenty of paper.
Right.
But it is chock. Do y'all have any of these at the office?
We have a few, yeah.
You have a few at the office? That'd be what I'd suggest you do. Go by the office and pick one up. But it's just chock full of information about ponds. And ponds require different levels of maintenance depending on what you use your pond for. If it's just for aesthetic purposes and you don't do a whole lot of fishing out of it, then pretty much all you really need to do is keep the bank clean and keep in mind that whenever you put anything in that pond, like if you blow grass into the pond, when it breaks down, it utilizes oxygen that the plankton that can interfere with the food that the fish need. So blow your grass away from the pond when you're or use a mulching system so that you don't blow anything into the pond if you can help it. If you have weeds and need to control the weeds, there are several herbicides depending upon the type of weeds that you have. This is not really the best time of the year to control weeds in a pond. And during the late hot summer, really the springtime is the better time to use herbicides. If you need to and you feel like you have to, don't go out there and treat your whole bank area or around the pond at one time. I wouldn't treat, if they're floating weeds, I probably wouldn't treat over a third of that pond at a time.
Can you give us an example of a floating weed?
Duckweed.
Okay. Duckweed.
And is an example of a floating weed. And I can. There are submerged weeds and then emergent weeds. There's some that grow on the edge of the pond that you can use glyphosate and different different herbicides. I've got several here that I can. On weed control, and that is probably, you guys, is that the number one call you get?
Yeah,
at
but I know
office?
Booker deals a lot with that.
On
weeds. Weeds control and
right.
algae in the pond in that area, yeah.
Right, well, some examples of the floating weeds, I mentioned duckweed, water meal, water hyacinth is another floating weed. There's several algae out there, planktonic, filamentous, chara. The submerged weeds would be like water milfoil, naiad, elodea, pond weeds, hydrilla, and then the emergent weeds are the ones that are kind of on the edge in shallow water. American lotus, cattail, smartweeds, water primrose, water lily, and willows. Yeah. And if you have a lot of shallow areas, you're going to have a lot of these emergent weeds. And if you have a pretty steep bank and it goes down to 4 feet, 3 or 4 feet, you're not going to have a lot of these emergent weeds. So you might need to keep that in mind if you're constructing a pond, or if your water gets low and you can do some cleaning out around the pond. But some of the, you use different herbicides for different kinds of weeds. On the floating weeds that we talked about, you can use 2,4-D, Diquat, or a couple of the more common herbicides that you would use according to label directions.
Sure.
Most of the agricultural chemicals that are out there are not good for ponds, and you don't want even that runoff from an agricultural field to get into a pond. But these herbicides that I'm mentioning have been cleared by EPA, and they are safe for the aquatic organisms, the fish, and things like that.
Okay.
The submerged weeds, again, some of them, the 2,4-D will work on water milfoil. Diquat is pretty much labeled for all of those submerged weeds, and Indothal is another common herbicide for submerged weeds, and then I see Floridone, and I'm just looking.
Right.
I'm on page 19, I think, of this publication.
It's a nice chart.
It has all of these weeds and herbicides listed.
Right. And while you're looking at that, Mr. D, how do you spray for like submerged weeds and some of these other weeds that you're mentioning, though? Just right over the top.
Just put it out in
Put it
there.
out in there.
But you need to follow the label,
Right.
and you need to understand how if you're treating a floating weed out there, so you're basically putting a certain amount of herbicide in that pond. You need to know how much water you got in that, how many acre feet of water, and then the back section of this
Got it covered,
publication, it tells you how to figure that.
Okay.
Let me see if I can find that right there. Look
Oh,
at
it
that.
sure does. How about that?
You know, it has some examples, and it tells you how to do, you know, the algebra that you use to figure, and there's probably you know, a little geometry in there too, you know.
Shapes. Yeah.
But it tells you how to figure how much to put out there, and you can just spray it, you know, with hose-in sprayers or anything like that to get it out in the water. The emergent weeds around, you just go around the edge of the pond and spray with your regular, you know, backpack sprayer or sprayer.
Right.
But again, this is not the ideal time of the year to do that.
Sure.
And keep in mind, if you have a lot of dead material that goes into that pond, as it decomposes, it's going to, you know, take up oxygen. So you might want to try to kind of rake some of that out and you know, put it in your compost pile or something like that.
Yeah, they want to freak what we asked for and how deep the pond. We do out there and look at them, how deep the pond, how many acres do you have an acre pond or what, 2 acres there. And they'll tell you how when you start using the chemical, how to measure it out.
Right, right. You just need to know that. If you are a serious fisherman or you're producing catfish in your pond, and then you need to actually do a soil test to collect mud samples from the bottom of the pond, let it dry out, and because you need the pH to be between 5.2 and 6 or something like that. So you might have to lime your pond. You may have to fertilize it because you're fertilizing the algae that the fish feed on. But you only do that if you're very seriously about producing a certain number of pounds of fish from that. If you're just, you know, catching a bass every once in a while, you probably need to do a population survey every once in a while to determine what you've got, and you can do that by seining. You know, y'all got one of the best fish specialists in the country, Ron Blair.
Yeah, Ron Blair.
Is the UT Extension weed fish specialist. I know he has a lot of other irons in the fire, but he's a good man to go out and put in a pond, let him go around and do some seining to do a fish survey. But you know, you can do that to try to determine whether or not you need to restock, or but you know, if that was the pond was just for aesthetic purposes primarily and want the grandkids to fish every once in a while, I would keep it mow around the edge. I'd make sure I have some mosquito fish or the BTI.
Good point. Yeah.
The BTI in that pond, because they do produce mosquitoes, and snakes there are a lot of water snakes.
Yeah, I was going to get to
so
that.
That's another reason to mow around the edge. You know, if you let it grow up around the edge and have you a little bit narrow path going down to the edge, you may have some visitors. You know, and there may be other people that like that little
I hate
path.
snakes. I don't hate them, but like them.
But it's a amazing ecosystem. It's its own little ecosystem, and you got water birds and interesting things, turtles and frogs and things like that are all part of it, and it's pretty neat. But it does require a bit of maintenance. You need one of these books.
Yeah, come by the office and get you one of those books. Myself and Book would be more than happy to help you out. Thank you, Mr. D. Good information. All right.
At what time does a gardener decide what plants are worth saving and which are too far gone to even try to resuscitate? For example, this one right here, I'd say it's a goner. There's no green growth whatsoever. That one we can yank up and replace. This one right here, well, I'd say if 80–90% of the canopy is dead, that one is not worth saving either. You know, you could just buy another plant and it could catch up with these others and you could save a lot of time. So that one goes too. But now these three, that's a little better chance of maybe these recovering. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut off the dead, and then we can kind of see what they look like. Oh, it's easier to do this. There we go. Now some of this is weeds, so we're going to pull that out so you can get an idea of really what's left of the plant that's still growing. So see, that one's not so bad. That one's pretty good. All right, let's look at this one. Now see, that one's not bad. See, we got a pretty good little canopy. Then let's look at this last one. There we go. Not too bad. I think these are probably going to make it. They're probably going to come out next spring, put a little fertilizer on them, and they should come out and do okay.
All right, here's our Q&A segment. Y'all ready? All right, these are some great questions. Here's our first via email. What is this on my zinnia leaves? And this is Pat from Covington, Louisiana. So what do you think about that, Mr. D?
It looked like alternaria leaf spot to me, is what it looks like.
Yeah.
And that's a common, really common problem on zinnias. And there's several fungicides out there that'll help you with that. And that's other than if you're overwatering or watering at the wrong time and that kind of thing, the cultural things that you may be doing wrong, avoid doing that.
Yeah.
You know, make sure you don't water late in the day so that the leaves stay wet all night long, and water early enough so that they have plenty of time to dry off. But the fungicides, a lot of them, chlorothalonil is a good fungicide for alternaria leaf spot, mancozeb, myclobutanil, thiophanate, methyl, copper, you know, all of those fungicides. Just check the label and be sure you follow the label directions. And if you start spraying with the fungicide, you're not going to clear up the spots on those leaves. They're there as long as the leaf is there. You possibly can prevent it from spreading, and then next year, if you'll start with spray a little bit early, or spray earlier, you can prevent it from spreading. You can't cure the problem that you already have, but you can maybe prevent it from spreading or prevent it from happening.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's very common.
Yeah, it's very
I
common.
love zinnias, and,
Yeah, I do too.
and no matter what I do, I always get a little bit of that, especially
always get
late in
that.
the season.
No.
You know,
And when it's
and
hot, humid,
yeah.
that's when you see it the
And one
most.
thing I found out, I like to save my seed.
Okay.
You know, from my big pretty flower ones that are pretty red or different colors, and I'll save the seed. Rather do they come back true to form, but
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
I like to save the seed. And I found out though that I seem to get progressively worse, and it is carried in the seed.
Seed.
The pathogen is carried in the seed
Okay.
and on plant debris. So again, clean up your plant debris because those pathogens can overwinter, and I'm gonna have to, I guess, quit collecting my seed, or either I'm gonna have to be better with spraying because it's
Spray schedule.
the seed can be contaminated.
Oh, that's good. That's good. That's good. That's good. All right. There you have it, Pat. Appreciate the question. All right. Here's our next via email. My blueberry bloomed a lot in the spring, but never made a berry. How do I get berries? And this is Sandra. So, Mr. D likes those old blueberries, right? So,
like
how do we
blueberries.
get them,
Yeah.
Mr. D?
And it sounds like that is a rabbit eye type, probably. And if you're in the southeastern United States, or that's the most common blueberry grown, and they do require cross-pollination.
Okay.
And the more different varieties you have, the better off you are. But you need at least 2 different varieties, and they really need to bloom at about the same time for it to work.
Well, that is good because, the information we got, she only had one plant,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
doesn't need to be pollinated, so you just answered
Yeah,
those.
cross-pollination is
Yeah.
better fruit set.
That's
for
right.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, if it's a high bush type in more northern areas, they do tend to be self-fruitful, and I can think of one reason that a high bush type could have a lot of blooms on it and have no berries at all, and that would be a late freeze.
Yep. Yep.
A late freeze could take all the blooms out.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I can't think of any other reason.
Exactly. That's everything that I had thought about too. And for an example, all of my rabbit eye blueberries this spring, when they bloomed in full bloom, we had that really, really cold weather. And for the first time ever, I had no fruit set.
None.
It killed all of the blooms.
I had that happen last year on mine.
Really?
And this year, I had a frost. I live about 80 miles north of Memphis, and so I had that late freeze, but I wasn't in
Did you
full
cover 'em
bloom at
up?
that time. No, I did not. I thought I did that one time. One time, I did that one time, and it didn't get below freezing that night. So I never again am I going to do that. But I didn't have. I think it helped my crop this year because I had a very heavy
Well, that's
blueberry
great.
crop,
Yeah,
and they
man,
were
I
bigger.
didn't have
and
any.
it just kind of took a few of them out.
Okay.
Yeah. I thought about covering them up. I knew the cold was coming too.
And you didn't even cover them up?
No, I'm too sorry, I reckon. Too cold.
You gotta practice what
it's
you
too
preach.
cold. I know it is.
It's not easy.
It's too cold. I won't go out there.
I mean, my rabbit eye types are probably
Yeah, they're big.
Yeah,
I
they're
bet you
probably-
they're 8 feet tall.
8, 10 feet tall.
Yeah.
on
That's
mine,
Pretty good
so.
size. Yeah. And they produce pretty well, huh?
Oh, well, I had a great crop. Best crop I've ever had this year.
How many bushes you got?
4. And I think we had like 25
Wow.
gallons.
Gallons,
of
man.
those 4 blueberries.
Making me hungry.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Getting Kelly hungry.
Yeah. No, they're good. They're good.
Oh,
They're good
man.
for you too.
Yeah, they are good. So there you have it.
for you.
Sandra, thank you so much for your question. And there's your answer from Mr. D himself, right? Still eating those blueberries. All right, so Mr. D, Dr. Kelly, thank y'all so much. Fun as always.
Yep.
Fun as always.
Good to
Thank
be
you very much.
Great time.
Remember, we love to hear from you. Send us an email or letter. The email address is questions@familyplotgarden.com. And the mailing address is Family Plot, 7151 Cherry Farms Road, Cordova, Tennessee, 38016. Or you can go online to familyplotgarden.com. That's all we have time for today. Thanks for watching. The gardening season is pretty much over. If you had any problems this year that stumped you, go to familyplotgarden.com. We have answers to over 1,000 gardening questions. If you don't see your questions answered, drop us a line and we'll try to answer it. Be sure to join us next week for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Be safe.